years ago. And that opens the door to the question, who was here 20,000 years ago to build complex archaeological structures on the continent of Antarctica? And what role does that play in the history and the mythology that's almost universal of ancient civilizations? It may be what we now see is the 6 cradles of civilization very soon will expand to at least 7 and possibly more.
You get reports occasionally of structures being found emerging out of the ice at Antarctica. Just recently there was one which took my attention to do with what was described as almost like an embanked area, like a hill fort that was found. And that struck my attention as being different to all the other stories. And this raises my hopes that these settlements did actually exist. I think this matter should be looked into more. The only problem is, can we interest archaeologists to spend good money to go to Antarctica to investigate these sites? I think it's possible that as the ice starts to melt in Antarctica, which it is doing more and more, that it will reveal structures. And if this is the case, those structures have probably been buried in the ice for tens of thousands of years. So these are going to be very, very ancient indeed. And they could easily be the product of hybrid descendants.
But who could these descendants be? Researchers like Billy Carson lead us to some new theories on Antarctica and its current location.
Antarctica had once been a tropical island, and that was the center of the so-called pre-Adamite civilization. And it got moved to what's now the South Pole. There might have been some kind of nuclear war that took place on Earth. That's entirely possible. Or there could have been some energetic release from the sun. The resulting effect appears to be that the Atlantean flood becomes the Atlantean glacier, and because it's now in a new position where the water freezes, it turns into Antarctica.
If structures from a pre-Adamite culture might exist below the ice.
Hey, good morning. Have you tried putting butter in your coffee?
Coffee is one of the healthiest things you can put in your body. In fact, some studies have found people who drink coffee have healthier hearts, blood sugar, and it can even help you lose weight.
Ice. Who are these beings that did not survive a cataclysm? Or did they?
The descendants of the pre-Adamites, the people who were here before the flood, the people who actually messed up, and apparently the Elohim voluntarily let this flood happen to largely wipe out the pre-Adamites on Earth. So these pre-Adamites, some of them, apparently still exist. They still have elongated skulls, and they still believe that they are the gods and that we are essentially an invading civilization.
Could it really be true that there was once an unknown civilization of ancient beings in Antarctica? In 1929, a map was discovered inside Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, depicting Antarctica before it was covered with ice. Archaeologists have been able to carbon date the map's creation back to a Turkish admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, who plotted it in 1513. This age was hundreds of years before the continent was discovered by modern man. Reis's map has both conventional and alternative scholars flummoxed. Where did he gather his knowledge? If the landmass depicted is indeed Antarctica, is it possible that our true origins date back to a prehistoric seafaring civilization? While mainstream scientists are resistant to get behind these findings, no other explanation for the mysteries this map presents have been offered. But with global warming exposing new topography under the glaciers, harder evidence may be just around the corner.
Architecture has been located in Antarctica that will confirm there was in fact intelligently built ruins down there, and that would be a world-changing thing of significance. This Atlantean legend has an incredible amount of provable data behind it, and if we do get the disclosure that we're being promised, this is going to become an open, public, acknowledged thing that there are in fact stone monuments under the ice in Antarctica that are very ancient. If that happens, everything that we thought we knew about human history has to be rewritten. And we are now dealing with an ancient civilization far predating those which we now acknowledge to be true. You have to understand that there is a very significant difference between how the scholarship on ancient civilizations is seen in the open, unclassified world as opposed to how it's being seen within the secret government and the military-industrial complex. They have started to learn that no matter what the ancient mythology is, if you dig deep enough, and you're going to find out, wait a minute, there's something here that suggests this is not a myth. This is a story about beings that at one time were contacting people on Earth on a widespread basis. They are very aware that extraterrestrial civilizations have been visiting Earth since primordial antiquity. Very quickly, we're going to be dealing with the idea that extraterrestrials were immigrating here. And thus, the reason why we're not finding the trail of pottery shards and all the things that archaeologists want to see that build up into a technological civilization, the reason is because they didn't become technological on Earth. They were already technological when they got here.
In 2011, geochemist Stacy Lowry found evidence that America and Antarctica were once joined before 1 billion years of continental drift sent them in different directions. Since then, more geologists have come forward with tests showing that the composition of magnetic isotopes in rocks taken from Antarctica's coastland were indistinguishable from samples of rocks in a rift that runs through the Great Lakes of Michigan. The two rock samples are reportedly the exact same age and have identical chemical properties. If Antarctica was once connected to the Americas, then is it also possible that the same pre-Adamite species once populated both more than 55,000 years ago?
The ancestry of these people could be incredibly complicated. Initial DNA results indicated that at least part of their bloodline is not Native American whatsoever. So we're looking at the possibility that part of their ancestry is from the Middle East, which means they did not cross the Bering Land Bridge like all other Native Americans' ancestors supposedly did. And that would be a major historical discovery.
When we look at these pre-Adamite records of what these ancient texts are telling us, it maps together very nicely with the actual archaeological ruins that we find around the world. What gets even more interesting is when we get into the idea of the post-Atlantean catastrophe world, meaning post-12,500 years ago. Two pre-Adamite groups survived, one group in Europe and one in Asia, which becomes the Egyptian pharaonic line, and the other group in Mesoamerica, which becomes the Mesoamerican priesthood. They apparently did not have any contact with each other until the time of the conquistadors, roughly about the 1500s or 1600s. According to what we see in these ancient texts, these two groups represent what people are calling the Illuminati, what people are calling the New World Order, and the basis for the whole system of the divine right of kings and royal blood.
Is it possible that these ancient elites are controlling our political and religious organizations? And if so, could this be a way of safeguarding some great secret? Perhaps something of unimaginable value hidden under the ice in Antarctica?
Behind the scenes, there was a Signor Balducci who said that the Vatican had information about extraterrestrials and that there was a decision made in the beginning of the 90s that the Vatican would support announcements of the existence of other life in the universe and say, this reinforces the size and the strength of God.
What kind of information about ancient races on this planet and their connection to Antarctica might be the next reveal? Billy Carson describes Antarctica as a crash site from a nearby planet.
About 55,000 to 60,000 years ago, a group of beings that originated on Mars may have crash landed in Antarctica. This group happened to have very elongated skulls. Not only did they have elongated skulls, but they were about 14 feet tall and had very strange physiology. They had developed in a different area where the barometric pressure was different, the gravitational fields were different, and it explains the differences in their physiology. Could an ET group have understood all of the science and built all of these pyramids right there on the island because they needed to tap into an energy source?
If there was such a species that existed, could this represent a different genetic code than that of humans? Is it possible that this different species was almost destroyed in a cataclysm that encouraged the survival of the human species to shepherd the Earth?